Causes, actions and consequences of the revolution in March 1917 in Russia. There were many long-term causes of the revolution. Firstly, Tsar Nicholas II was a weak and remote leader who never knew or engaged with his people. 1% of the population in Russia were nobility. The vast majority of Russia was peasants who worked on farms in the countryside. The Tsarina was German, and so when in World War I, people created rumours about her that she was a spy. She also had a friend called Rasputin, who was disliked by most of the population and the Tsar's ministers because he was power-hungry and a drunk. Peasants and industrial workers were unhappy with their living conditions, wages and general quality of life, but due to their oppression. And during World War I, there were desperate food shortages, and so many people starved because all the food was being sent to the soldiers. There were also short-term causes of the revolution. In the winter of 1916 and 1917, it was very cold in many parts of Russia, with temperatures reaching as low as minus 35 degrees. Many people were starved or frozen to death as a result. Also, a large factory had been shut down, and so many thousands of people were made redundant. This meant that there was no income for many households, and food prices rose by 700%. The factory that was shut down was a large producer of fuel, so this led to people freezing to death and going without fuel. Now let's get to the main event of the revolution. On 8th of March 1916, around 40,000 industrial workers went on strike in protest against the Tsar and their living conditions. This was at the Putilov factory. In the 2 successive days, thousands more joined the strike. 9th of March, and many thousands of women joined, and by 10th of March, there were hundreds of thousands of people all in protest against the Tsar. They wanted political change, as wages were low, living conditions were terrible, and the people were not being heard. They were shouted down and killed by the Cossacks, many of them. The leader of the Duma, Rodzianko, informed the Tsar, Nicholas II, by telegram about the severity of this strike. In response to this, the Tsar ordered the police to kill the rioters. The police then killed many of the protesters, which further provoked the people. On the 10th of March, the Tsar decided to shut down the Duma. However, the next day the Duma joined with some mutinied soldiers and retook control from the Tsar. The Tsar attempted to pass the throne to his son, but he was too weak to rule. Finally, on 12th of March 1917, Tsar Nicholas II was forced to abdicate, and just like that, over 300 years of Tsardom finished. There were many consequences of this revolution as well. Over 300 years of Tsardom, the equivalent of an emperor or king in Russia, came to an end. A provisional government was set up with the Petrograd Soviet to replace the Tsar. As the March Revolution was spontaneous and not planned, the new provisional government faced many problems. The members of the provisional government were not used to making important decisions. Their previous role was just to advise the Tsar. Any orders had to be approved by the Petrograd Soviet. They had issued Order Number 1, which stated that soldiers will not obey orders from the Duma-based government that had not been agreed on with the Soviet. There were also a few opposition parties to the Tsar and the Soviets. There were many political parties who wanted to make their policies known to the public to try and be voted into power without force. The Bolshevik Party posed the most threat at the time. Lenin, the leader who had just returned from exile in Switzerland, when Lenin arrived back in Russia, he had already come up with the idea for the Bolsheviks to seize power from the provisional government. In July 1917, there were several organized demonstrations against the government, fueled by the Bolsheviks. Kerensky crushed the demonstrations and killed 400. The Bolshevik leaders were arrested, and so Lenin fled in exile again to Finland. In September 1917, Kornilov decided to seize control to restore discipline and regain control. He marched to Petrograd, but Kerensky armed the Bolshevik prisoners so that they would stop the uprising. They managed to convince many of Kornilov's men to desert, and the Bolsheviks were hailed as saviors. There was also another uprising in 1917 in November. However, that is a story for another time. Thank you for watching this presentation. Goodbye.